Hi guys, and welcome to Hack Your Health. I'm Erica. So today I'm going to be making a video about meditation for anger, and in particular, I learned a lot about this when I was dealing with an autoimmune disease. In my case, that was Crohn's disease. And I read the book The Body Says No by Gabor Mate, and he was talking about how in people with autoimmune diseases, he often noticed that they didn't express their anger in a healthy way. And in particular, they repressed their anger or held it inwards. And this created sort of health problems in the body. And I definitely had a lot of anger, and at the same time, people would always be saying, "Oh, you seem like you would never be angry. I can't imagine you ever getting angry." And I did talk to another doctor who said that she noticed that in her rheumatoid arthritis patients, especially one in particular who was extremely nice, and that kind of goes along with it. So basically, maybe thinking that you don't deserve to be angry or that you shouldn't be angry, and then turning that anger sort of inwards towards yourself. So some people have the opposite problem, which is they externalize their anger and basically take it out on others in a very damaging way a lot of the time. So whether your anger is turned inward or turned outward, both can cause problems, though potentially different kinds of problems. And of course, a lot of this has to do with your upbringing. Many people are, raised in such a way that they aren't allowed to express their anger, or somebody is getting very angry at them, so they either learn to mimic that or they don't want to be like them, so they decide to be different. And anyways, a lot of people don't learn proper emotional kind of well-being as children, and therefore need to learn it as adults. So the first step is basically, in my practice at least, which I learned from various sources, including Buddhism and books and stuff like that, all sorts of things, would be to just take responsibility for your own anger. So this can be very difficult at times. So basically, it can be thought about like this. If you poke a hole in a water balloon, then water starts coming out, right? And you could say that the person who poked the hole is responsible for the water. But really, the water couldn't have come out if it wasn't already there. So it's similar with anger. So even though people might do something that triggers your anger, and that does happen no matter what, the anger can only come out if it's already inside of you. So really, what you're dealing with is your own anger, and basically we all need to be responsible for our own feelings. And by that, I just mean that, of course, you're going to get angry and people are going to do things that aren't right. That's part of life. But how you respond to those things is your choice and your responsibility. So it's not okay to, react with violence, for example. Even if someone does something wrong, you're still responsible for your violent act, right? So that's the first step, is to, instead of blaming outside events or things that happen to you for your anger, to first think yourself, okay, this anger is my anger. Nobody is responsible except for me. And that can be very powerful because it puts you in a position of, instead of being at at the whim of outside forces where you're now having a choice about how you manage your emotions. So that's an essential first step. So then there's also just, I suppose, what you do when you feel angry. So in my case, the anger would often be turned inwards. So I would, beat myself up. I would treat myself very unkindly, both in terms of sort of my actions, but also mostly my thoughts and feelings towards myself. And in many cases, this can be the other way where it's externalized. So in either case, this is acting on anger. But another sort of middle ground would be to simply allow yourself to feel the anger without any kind of action or response. So when you feel angry, instead of internalizing or externalizing it, to simply feel the anger and just be still. And that's part of choice, which is instead of letting this anger control me, I can just feel it. I don't need to do anything about it, right? Of course, there are times when you need to take action regarding something that makes you angry. You may need to communicate clearly with someone. You may need to stop something from happening. And that's why anger exists, is because it's helping us to learn our boundaries and when they've been crossed. So it's very likely that you do need to set a boundary when anger is coming up. But it's better to go about setting it without expressing it as anger. That's often more effective. So you can feel the anger, recognize what's, the boundary that's being crossed, and then communicate that in a respectful, clear way. That's a good response to anger, instead of a reaction, which would just be to snap. And often when you're very, very angry, people don't really listen, right? So it can be quite counterproductive at times to respond in that way. So one practice that I found very helpful was to simply sit and allow myself to feel anger. In particular, there was a period of time where I got something quite terrible happened in my life, that happened because of a person that I really trusted, right? Like a betrayal. And I was so angry that I really felt like it might make me sick. And I didn't know what to do with all that anger. I knew that taking an action wouldn't be the right course in that situation, particularly because it wouldn't be safe for me to do that in that situation. But at the same time, I needed to do something. I couldn't live with so much anger. So I would just sit there and allow myself to feel the anger and to accept what had happened, and basically to do my best to resolve that feeling for myself. And what I found was that at the core of that anger was really sadness, and to allow myself to feel that sadness was equally important. So I would suggest that you take these steps if you're realizing that anger is potentially at the root of some health issues that you might be facing, or like a contributing factor, or if you're realizing that the way that you're expressing your anger might be having a detrimental impact on your life or on people around you, I would suggest taking these kinds of steps, which are, first of all, to accept that your anger is your own. It may be triggered by things outside you, but how you manage it is your own responsibility. And kind of alongside that is to feel anger. Someone does something very wrong to you and you feel angry, you're only hurting yourself. Like, anger is, is it called stress hormones, and what are they called? Neurotransmitters. So sending neurotransmitters through your body, which have an effect on, everything from how your body feels, your emotional state, your digestion, tons of things. Cortisol is related to things like high blood pressure, and so basically you can feel the effect that anger is having on your body if you pay attention, which is negative. You can feel it, coursing through your veins, really. And when you're in that state, you're hurting yourself, So that's another thing to acknowledge, is not just that it's your anger, but that your anger is affecting your body and your well-being. And, you have, on some level, a choice. So to make the choice to say, I'm going to resolve my anger. I don't need to go around feeling angry about what this person did to me or whatever, because that's only hurting myself, and I don't deserve to be hurt by them in the first place, and I also don't deserve to continue hurting myself, right? So the next step would be to basically become more aware of your anger, so you have a choice about how you express it, and to learn to, feel the anger without taking any particular action. So that's where meditation is really helpful. And then also to allow yourself to really deeply feel the anger and sort of get to know it. In yoga and meditation, we often think about it as these are kind of past traumas being trapped in the body. And when you don't deal with them at the time, they become stored somehow, like energetically. And as you quiet the mind and allow yourself to really open, you can even start to release these past traumas or release this blocked energy. And that can be very liberating and help you kind of change the patterns in your life, which sounds vague, and I don't know, but basically if you become quiet and start to really accept your feelings, you can really liberate yourself from a lot of the sort of stagnant energies or patterns that you've been living with potentially for like most of your life. So that's why I would recommend just being really quiet and just allowing yourself to feel. So part of allowing yourself to feel is to sort of create a distance between your feelings and the stories that you tell yourself. So that would be the next sort of step. Just sit in your practice, and you can either focus on your breath, or when I would practice this for anger, I would specifically allow myself to feel the anger. Specifically choose to say, okay, this is a time where I'm allowing that anger to come up. I'm giving it the freedom to be felt right now. And I would just sit there and feel the anger while slowly, deeply breathing. And yes, thoughts would sometimes come up, or sometimes I would realize something. But for the most part, I would try to free myself from the stories associated with the anger, and instead just feel the feeling in and of itself. So it can be helpful to focus on something. So focus on your breath, or just focus on the emotion, focus on something that you're looking at. Basically have something that you've chosen to bring your attention to when you start to tell a story. Because sometimes we can get trapped in these cycles of thoughts. And the thing with the cycle of thought is it can happen at any time. And when it does happen, your body doesn't really know the difference between when you're thinking a story and when it's really happening. So it can bring you back into that state. So let's say I'm thinking about something that, my ex did that was just so wrong. I'll start thinking that pattern, and if I haven't resolved that feeling for myself, I'll go right into it and feel all that anger right there as if it's really happening. But it's not happening, it's the past, right? So when you do this practice, it's a really good opportunity to sort of break those cycles by, instead of following and following and following and following that thought, to say, okay, that's a thought. Okay, I'm coming back to my breath, coming back to just observing my feelings or whatever, looking at a tea light candle. It could be anything. And that way, when you experience these patterns, you don't necessarily need to follow them. So these are just a few of the things that I found helpful, and I hope that they can be sort of insightful or helpful for you as well. So those are some things that I would just recommend if you're having an issue with anger, is simply to just get used to allowing yourself to feel it, take responsibility, and see how that goes for you. And of course, talking to people about the things that might be making you angry can be really helpful too, to get some validation or to get a different perspective. But these are some things that you can do on your own time when you have some free time, to just start to practice deepening your awareness and creating more of a choice about how you respond to your anger, and maybe start to let go of it. So if you have any questions or comments or suggestions or anything like that, please let me know. And if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like videos on, also let me know. And I'll do another series of yoga poses for anger in a different video. If you'd like more of an active kind of response, that you can kind of really put yourself in your body instead of your mind, because that can also be really helpful. And I wish you all the best, and thanks so much for watching. Okay, bye.